Hello, friends. Welcome to Science Talk. I'm your host, Jim Massel. Now, this is kind of an interesting piece of research that I want to share with you, and it's controversial. And the numbers recorded and reported in here certainly not set in stone. They're open to debate. And what is it about? Well, humans' handiwork's mass exceeds world's life forms. Okay, so what is meant by that? In other words, everything that we have produced, buildings, roads, appliances, right? Everything we have ever made now outweighs the plant and animals evolved over 3 billion years. So in other words, we have more mass of our construction than there are organisms on the planet. So basically saying human handiwork has now probably surpassed all that evolution has put on the planet. The mass of all things made by humans, cities, roads, factories, houses, cars, trains, machines, bricks, concrete, steel, glass, tile, asphalt, planes, etc., may have just overtaken the mass of all living things on the planet. Among those living things now being outweighed by buildings and roads are all 7, actually more like 8 billion plus people on the planet, their livestock, their cornfields, rice paddies, orchids, and gardens. Now, this is a conclusion that is difficult to, arrive at, and is certainly open to being challenged, but it at least it opens up a discussion. And it's basically indicative of a measure of the scale of how humans have changed the planet and the speed at which this is happening. At the beginning of the 20th century, the massive human-produced infrastructure probably added up to just about 3% of the mass of the planet's living tissue. Its forests and savannas, wetlands, scrub, mammals, fish, all the life forms, flora and fauna. But in just a little over a century, 120 years or so, and this study was published in the journal Nature, 2 things happened. Human population increased 4-fold. So it went from like 2 billion to 8 billion. And with those numbers, so did human demand for manufactured things and built objects. Human demand for farmland has cleared the wilderness and reduced the overall mass of planetary foliage by about half. Even though humans use ever more land for crops, the mass of those crops is vastly outweighed by the mass of trees and other forest plants cleared to make room to grow the crops. Once the planet was home to 2 trillion tons, also 2 teratons, same amount, of natural vegetable life, now it has been estimated to have been reduced to about 1 teraton. In other words, half, according to the researchers who embarked on this line of inquiry. The burden of human-fashioned hardware has been growing at about 30 billion tons a year. It doubled in mass every 20 years or so and is now estimated at 1.1 teratons. So in effect, the species now numbers about 8 billion, still adds up to only about 0.01% of global biomass, has quarried, mined, and built over so much of the planet that its infrastructure weighs more than the rest of living organisms. Even the output of the plastics industries at 8 billion tons adds up to more than twice the mass of all the planet's animals. And of course, where do you get plastics from? You have to get fossil fuels to make the plastics. So, of course, there's questions as how these measurements were arrived at. There's certainly possibility of error. Ron Milo of the Weizmann Institute for Science in Israel and his colleagues basically settled for estimates of the dry weight of living organisms. Dry weight is basically you remove the water content and weigh it. Now, that could skew the figures because the dry weight will be less than the total weight, including the water. Most organisms are about what, at least 60% water by weight. Putting that aside, okay, you know, yeah, if you made the estimates with using wet weights as well, you're going to obviously have a different outcome. But no matter how you want to look at this, the conclusion is the same. The scale to take over the planet by one species, Homo sapiens, is nearly complete and will be devastating for the rest of the natural world. This study provides a sort of big picture snapshot of the planet in 2020. This overview can provide a crucial understanding of our major role in shaping the face of the Earth in the current age of the Anthropocene. That's a statement by Professor Milo. The message to both the policymakers and the general public is that we cannot dismiss our role as a tiny one in comparison to the planet. We are already a major player, and I think with that comes a shared responsibility. The study is yet another in a series of that demonstrate the now overwhelming impact of human uh, activities upon the planet. 2 years ago, Professor Milo and colleagues made estimates of the mass of all living things on the planet and confirmed that humans probably outweigh by a factor of 10 the mass of all of the living wild mammals. He specifies mammals. Another team tried to calculate the mass of the human technosphere, and they reached the figure about 30 trillion tons. That's it. There's room for debate what these numbers are, but let's not lose the message for what the numbers may be. In the course of the last century or so, due to what we've been doing with burning the fossil fuels, we've kind of halted the cycles of ice ages, reversed the 50 million year cooling trend. Basically, a trend that started after the peak of the PETM, Paleocene Eocene thermal maximum, hothouse Earth. Geologists who argue that human handiwork has now shifted the planet into the new geological epoch, known as the Anthropocene. I guess it hasn't been officially called it that, but it's kind of like, yeah, that's what we're calling it. They've compiled a devastating catalog of changes in the natural world. Other groups have highlighted the human appropriation of the planet's land and water and its toll upon millions of other species that humans share the planet with. Professor Milo and his colleagues settled for a more simple illustration. They figured that the last 5 years, humans have been accumulating anthropogenic mass, roads, buildings, etc., at the rate of 30 billion tons a year. That is, if every person on the planet produced more than his or her own body weight in tarmac and bricks, cement, and steel every week. They warn, if current trends continue, anthropogenic mass, including waste, is expected to exceed 3 teratons by 2040, almost triple the dry biomass on Earth. Now, I received a pile of pushbacks on this recently, and I've done a video segment on it where I basically state that there are too many people on the planet. And I got a lot of pushback. I had people just doing vicious attacks on me, insulting me, etc., etc. And basically the attitude was, well, there's so much food is wasted. We didn't waste the food. Everyone could be fed. I think this study here proved my point. It's not just about food. You need space to house people, to produce the food, to conduct business. And if you're starting, and this is a finite planet, finite resources, you're going to transform whatever the ecosystems are into steel, concrete, asphalt jungle. Well, then that's taking away land that you need for housing and for producing food. This is not sustainable. More and more people are putting more and more demands on a critically ever shrinking resources that are available. You just can't keep putting more and more people on the planet. We're now basically turning this into an asphalt planet, asphalt concrete planet. So where are you going to get the food from? Right? Where are you going to get the food? And then of course there's all the issue of the climate change and the burning of fossil fuels and so on. All the positive feedback loops that kicked in. The oceans are dying. There's fires all over the place. So to simply say, oh, just don't waste the food and you can feed everyone, it's not a problem. Problem solved is naive at best and just plain stupid to say such a thing, and it betrays a lack of understanding of basic ecological principles. I'm sorry, to all those folks attacking me, you just basically don't know jack shit. So when people challenge me, I say, okay, what are your credentials? What advanced degrees do you have? I busted my ass getting my advanced degrees. So it just comes down to you cannot have more and more people on it, because where are you going to house them? How are you going to set aside land to produce food, and not, and plus what it does to the vegetation, to the ecosystems, to the fact that, as they showed here, you clear out the forest and so on, and then you're doing what? You're adding the CO2 to the atmosphere. The plants that are there do not draw down as much CO2. The biomass is less. This is, to be blunt, spiraling out of control. And like anything else, we're well above the carrying capacity. And when the species becomes well above the carrying capacity, corrective measures take place. And those corrective measures are going to be pathogens unleashed, creating more pandemics, starvation, and if humans decide to have a few wars, well, that'll be one way to reduce numbers. This is not sustainable, folks. Go check out my Are There Too Many People video. Go check it out. So this is further evidence that there's just too many people on the planet. The system, the planet is stressed out. It is at the breaking point. Okay, enough of my rant. Thank you for your time. Hello, folks. This is Jim here with Science Talk, asking you to please subscribe to my channel and to inform others of my channel and of the work that I do. Please share to social media platforms that you use. Also, as a reminder, don't forget to click the bell so that you know when I load up more videos. Finally, I ask that you support the work that I do by becoming a patron at patreon.com. Details in the description box below. Thank you for your support.